Welcome back to another video. Today I got a good one for you. This is the first part of a two-part video breaking down first-person shooter video games. This first part will detail what an FPS game is and what needs to be met for it to be considered a first-person shooter. And part 2 will go over the history of the genre. I hope you enjoy. First-person shooter, FPS, is a subgenre of shooter video games centered on gun and other weapon-based combat in the first-person perspective, with the player experiencing the action through the eyes of the protagonist or antagonist, which is armed, and then controlling the player character in a three-dimensional space. The genre shares common traits with other shooter games and in turn falls under the action game genre. Since the genre's inception, advanced 3D and pseudo-3D graphics have challenged hardware development, and multiplayer gaming has been integral. The first-person shooter genre can be traced all the way back to Wolfenstein 3D in 1992, which has been credited with creating the genre's basic archetype upon which subsequent titles were based. One such title, and which is more wide known by the general population, is Doom, which came out a year later in 1993. Often considered the most influential game in this genre, for some years, the term Doom clone was used to designate any of the game in this genre due to Doom's influence. Corridor shooter was another common name for the genre in early years, since processing limitations of the era's hardware meant that most of the actions in the game had to take place in enclosed areas such as cramped spaces like corridors or tunnels. First-person shooters are a type of video game that relies on the first-person point of view, with the player experiencing actions through the eyes of the character. They differ from third-person shooters in that a third-person shooter, the player can see the character they are controlling usually from behind or above. The primary design is combat, mainly involving firearms or other type of long-range weapons. The first-person shooter category is considered a distinct genre itself, or a type of shooter game, and it turned into a subgenre because of the wide release of games after Doom in a similar sense. Over time, the term Doom clone was replaced with first-person shooter. There are occasional disagreements regarding the specific design elements which constitute a first-person shooter. For example, titles like Deus Ex or BioShock may be considered first-person shooters, but also fit into the role-playing category as they borrow extensively from that genre. Other examples like Far Cry or Rage could be considered adventure games because they focus more on exploring than a simple action. They task players with multiple different objectives other than just killing enemies. They revolve around the construction of a complex cinematic storylines with a well-defined cast of secondary characters to interact with. Furthermore, certain puzzle or platform games are also sometimes categorized as first-person shooters, despite their lack of any direct combat or shooting element, instead using the first-person perspective to help players immerse themselves within the game and better navigate 3D environments. For example, in the case of Portal, the gun the player carries is used to create portal walls rather than fire projectiles. Some commentators also extended that the definition to include combat flight simulators and space battle games whenever the cockpit of the aircraft is depicted from a first-person point of view. Like most first-person shooter games, first-person shooters involve an avatar, one or more ranged weapons, and a number of varying enemies. Because they take place in a 3D environment, these games tend to be somewhat more realistic than 2D shooter games and have more accurate representations of gravity, lighting, sound, and collisions. First-person shooters played on personal computers are more often controlled with a combination of a keyboard and mouse. This system has been claimed to be superior than console games, which frequently uses two analog sticks, one for running and one for running and sidestepping. The other is for looking and aiming. It is common to display the character's hand and weaponry in the main view with heads-up display showing health, ammunition, and location. Often it is possible to overlay a map of the surrounding area in one of the top or bottom corners, like games like Apex Legends, and so you have a tab to go into it. First-person shooters generally focus on action gameplay with fast-paced combat and dynamic firefights being a central point of the experience, though certain titles may place a greater emphasis on narrative and problem-solving. In addition to shooting, melee combat may also be extensively used in some games. In some games, melee weapons are especially powerful as they reward the risk the player must take in maneuvering his character into close proximity to the enemy. In other games, melee weapons are less effective but necessary as a last resort. Tactical shooters tend to be more realistic and require players to use teamwork and strategy in order to succeed. The player can often command a squad of characters which may be controlled by AI or human teammates and be given different tasks throughout the course of the mission. First-person shooters typically present players with a vast arsenal of weapons that can have a large impact on how they will approach the game. Some games offer realistic reproductions of actual existing or even historical firearms. They simulate rate of fire, magazine size, ammunition amount, recoil, and accuracy. Depending on the context of the first-person shooters, they may incorporate some imaginative variations, including futuristic prototypes, alien technology, or magical weapons, and/or implementing a wide array of different projectiles from lasers to energy, plasma, rockets, and arrows. These many variations these many variations may also be applied to tossing of grenades, bombs, spears, and others like that. Also, more conventional modes of destruction may be employed to the playable character, such as flames, electricity, telekinesis, or supernatural powers. In the early era of first-person shooters, often designers allowed characters to carry a large number of different weapons with little to no reduction in speed or mobility. More modern games started to adopt a more realistic approach where a character can equip one handheld gun coupled with a rifle, or even limiting the player to one weapon of choice at a time, forcing them to swap between different alternatives according to the situation. In some games, there's the option to trade up or upgrade weapons, resulting in multiple degrees of customization. Thus, the standards of realism are extremely variable. The protagonist can generally get healing and equipment supplies by the means of collectible items such as first aid kits or ammunition packs simply by walking over or interacting with them around the map. Some games allow players to accumulate experience points in role-playing games that they can be used to unlock new weapons, bonuses, or skills. First-person shooters may be structurally composed in levels or use the technique of continuous narrative in which the game never leaves the first-person perspective. Other feature large sandbox environments which are not divided into levels but can be explored freely. In first-person shooters, protagonists interact with environment to varying degrees, from basics such as using the doors to problem-solving puzzles based on a variety of interactive objects. In some games, players can damage the environment. Also to varying degree, one common device is the use of barrels, which contain explosive material, which harm players nearby when shot. Other games feature environments that are extensively destructible, allowing for additional visual effects. The game world will often make use of science fiction, historical, usually particularly World War II, or modern military themes, with which such antagonists as aliens, monsters, terrorists, or soldiers of various types. Games feature multiple difficulty settings and harder modes. Enemies are tougher, more aggressive, and do more damage. The power-ups are limited. In easier modes, player can succeed through reaction time alone. In more difficult settings, it is often necessary to memorize levels through trial and error. First-person shooters may feature a multiplayer mode, taking place on specialized levels. Some games are designed specifically for multiplayer gaming and have a limited single-player modes, which players compete against game-controlled bots. Massively multiplayer online first-person shooters like those of PlanetSide series allow thousands of players to compete at once in a persistent world. Large-scale multiplayer games allow multiple squads with leaders issuing commands to a commander controlling the team's overall strategy. Multiplayer games have a variety of different match styles. The classic match types are deathmatch and its team-based variant, in which players score points by killing the opposing team's characters and capturing the flag, in which teams attempt to penetrate the opposing base and capture a flag and return it to their own base while preventing the other team from doing the same. Other game modes may attempt to capture enemy bases or areas on the map, attempting to take hold of an object for as long as possible while evading the other players, or deathmatch variations, involving limited lives, in which players fight over a particular potent weapon. These match types may also be customizable, allowing players varying options, weapons, health, and power-ups found on the map, as well as victory criteria. Games may allow players to choose between various classes, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. There are many free-to-play first-person shooters on the market now, including Wolfenstein, Enemy Territory, Apex Legends, Team Fortress 2, PlanetSide 2, and Halo Infinite. Some games are released as free-to-play, as their intended business model can be highly profitable, such as League of Legends, which earned $2 billion in 2017. Others, such as Warhammer 40,000, Eternal Crusade, began their life as a paid game and became free-to-play later to reach a wider audience after its initial disappointing reception. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry for the delay in upload. I got pulled in some last-minute family things yesterday and didn't have time to upload this video. Stay tuned for next week's video where I get into my breakdown of part 2 of the FPS genre, where I break down the history of the games as we go from the early 90s with Wolfenstein all the way to 2023 with games like, I don't know, Apex Legends and Fortnite, and how they've evolved from there. Hope to see you next week at that video. Enjoy your day, and hope you watch the rest of this game, see if I win.
Coming up like a gentle rain. Increasing altitude.
Actuating the barrier.
Did you see that snowball? I'm here. Let me balance around. Double fire. 不洗澡。Whoa, nice. Be purified.
Thank you. Victory.